Great to see you here at this member-only event with HXA. So welcome to all of you. This part is being recorded, and I'll tell you what we're going to do later, and there's going to be a portion that's not recorded. So I'm Martha McCoy, the HXA's Director of Member and Campus Engagement, and I want to welcome and introduce our 4 campus community leaders who are here to talk with us about the impact they're having on their campuses. These are leaders from 4 of our 74 campus communities in our campus community network with HXA. And these are especially engaged HXA members and principled leaders on their campuses. And I'm so grateful that they're here to talk to us about the impact they're having on their campuses in the policy arena. Lots of our campus communities are having lots of impact, not always in policy. Some are really impacting their campus culture, but this group here has been working in the arena of policy, and I think you'll find it really interesting. So let me just introduce them, and then I'm going to have a couple of questions for them. Then we'll move into breakout rooms where you can talk with them individually. So first we have Rachel Altman. Rachel is an associate professor of statistics and actuarial science at Simon Fraser University with research interests in methods for discrete longitudinal data and lifetime data, particularly as applied to medical problems. Rachel is the co-founder and co-leader of the SFU Academic Freedom Group, which is dedicated to promoting open inquiry and constructive disagreement in research and education at SFU, and a co-chair of the HXA campus community at SFU. Next is Scott Baldridge. Scott is the Loretta Cox Stuckey and Dr. James G. Trainum Distinguished Professor of Mathematics at Louisiana State University. He is a lead curriculum writer and mathematician. Eureka Math Engaged New York curriculum, a curriculum that is used by 57% of elementary teachers and 47% of secondary teachers in the United States. The co-director of the Gordon A. Kane Center for STEM Literacy, and a member of the HXA campus community at LSU. Next, we have Mary Kate Carey, who's an adjunct instructor at the University of Virginia, where she teaches small seminars for undergraduate students called Political Speechwriting and Democracy Out Loud, which studies the greatest speeches in American political history. Mary Kate also teaches a course called Election 2024 before 500 undergraduates, leading one of the only political science classes in America taught from both sides of the aisle. Mary Kate is the director of Think Again at UVA, an initiative to promote free speech, viewpoint diversity, critical thinking, and intellectual humility through student-facing programming, and also a co-chair of the HXA campus community at UVA. And last but not least, we have Peter Newton, who is Associate Professor of Environmental Studies and Associate Chair of Undergraduate Studies at the University of Colorado Boulder. Peter is an interdisciplinary environmental scientist who studies socio-environmental systems, and he's also a co-chair of the HXA campus community at UC Boulder. So thanks again, you all, for being here. I want to start us off by asking a couple of questions, and then again by the time is 25 after, we'll move into unrecorded breakout sessions. So first question is, I want you to tell us all about how you came to have a focus on policy impact and how you decided which policy or policies to focus on. And in addition, tell us a win you've had and even a challenge as well, if you also faced a challenge. Peter, maybe you can start us out.
Yeah, sure. Thanks very much, Martha. Thanks everyone for being here. Very kind introduction. I don't know that I'm a leader or I've done anything particularly meaningful, but I think we have one. I'll start with the win and then talk about the sort of decision that led to that. I would consider it a sort of modest but meaningful win, I think, in terms of departmental policy here at CU Boulder. And this is something that my colleague, or former colleague, sadly, Matt Burgess, who's on the call, I see. So welcome, Matt, who's now at University of Wyoming, and I worked on as co-chairs of the campus community here at CU Boulder. So in fall 2023, our win was that the faculty of our department voted unanimously to for the hiring process for all future faculty to no longer require applicants to submit a diversity statement or DEI statement, but instead to ask them to submit a service statement alongside the usual research and teaching statements. So a service statement is one that asks applicants to talk about the ways in which they have served or would serve the department, university, profession, or community. We wrote a HXA blog post about this, which Marisa might post in the chat, which you can read about the sort of details in more detail. But very briefly, we think service statements are a sort of constructive alternative to DEI statements or diversity statements for a few different reasons. Firstly, they align with the expectations for faculty reappointment, promotion, and tenure, since one's career progression as a faculty member usually requires success in those three areas of research, teaching, and also service. Secondly, they signal and recognize the value of service in whatever form that might take. And thirdly, they do allow faculty members to talk about DEI activities if they want to, but they don't compel anyone to talk about those things. And furthermore, they emphasize actions far more than they talk about political viewpoints. So that's our win. That's a modest but meaningful. In terms of how we came to that, I mean, it really sort of came around as our JEDI committee, Justice, Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion Committee in our department was proposing a set of quote unquote best practices for the department to use in hiring new faculty. And that included the proposition to require faculty to submit a diversity statement that would prompt applicants to discuss experiences of adversity and their commitment to DEI. Lots of other people have articulated elsewhere some of the concerns with using diversity statements in faculty hiring. Maybe we can post the link to FIRE's critique of diversity statements, which I think is one of the more comprehensive ones. Matt and I shared a lot of those concerns, but we realized that it wasn't necessarily sufficient to push back on that bad idea, but rather to also come up with a constructive alternative to help actually move the department forward. So that's what led us to put this together, this proposal to propose service statements instead. And we linked to that original proposal within our HXA blog post. So it wasn't a particularly straight line from start to finish, but after some back and forth, the department's faculty did vote unanimously to adopt a very lightly edited version of that original proposal. Maybe just finally to say, when you asked about challenges as well, we definitely wasn't without road bumps. The first time we voted on this, it didn't go our way. It was narrowly defeated. And that was, I think, partly a consequence of bad timing. Some of the faculty that would have spoken for it were just unable to be at the faculty meeting where it was discussed, and so the conversation was not representative of their opinion amongst the faculty, which was unfortunate. And secondly, there was the JEDI committee of our department brought forth to that meeting a letter from some student activists who threatened disruption were the proposal to be passed. We persisted and had one-on-one conversations and tried to talk to faculty about what concerns they might have. As I say, a lightly edited version of that proposal was then only a few weeks later voted unanimously through. So that's probably enough for now, but thanks for the prompt, Martha, and yeah, happy to talk more about the details in the breakout rooms.
Thank you, Peter. Who wants to go next? Rachel? Oh, Scott, go ahead. Yeah.
Rachel. So I'm a little bit different. We passed a institutional neutrality statement at LSU in the faculty senate. It's unanimous -1, so almost complete agreement. And it came about because I joined the Senate. It was kind of the idea that I wanted to do while I was a senator. And there came a moment where the president had stood up and said something to the effect that it would be nice if he had something like this. And so I used that as the springboard for getting a large group of people together to make a statement, which is now LSU's proposal 2401. So if you want to put that in the chat. And basically, it focuses on the reason why it was almost unanimous was because we focused on academic freedom. So academic inquiry, trying to give our professors as much of that as possible. And meanwhile, at the same time, not hindering the leadership from being able to talk about matters with regards to the academic mission of the university. So it's a balance. It's a balance between these two things. And if you come into my session, I'm happy to give you kind of a roadmap, if you will, for how to build one for yourself, and talk about some of the trials and some of the things that we had to worry about, and so on. So with that, I think I'll stop right here.
Thanks, Scott. Rachel, you want to go next?
Sure. Yeah, so you asked how I got involved with policy. I think that my colleagues and I were finding the environment on our campus increasingly oppressive, like many academics these days, and we were just trying to figure out what to do about it. And we just started, reading documents and reading endless. We feel like lawyers because we started reading not only university policies but also British Columbian laws and just amassing a lot of resources and understanding. And then we also were reading all the documents kind of put out by our administration, and as our knowledge, our understanding of the policies at play grew, we realized that the administration was seriously overstepping and really acting in violation of some of these existing policies and laws. So the policies and laws are actually great. Like, for example, in BC, we have a University Act, and it says explicitly that BC universities must be non-sectarian and non-political in principle. So we cite that line all the time to our administration. You cannot be political in your role. As an institution, you can't make a statement representing the institution that's political in nature. And we just argue. So now we read through every document and every proposed policy change. And honestly, I think we have an effect on all of them now. So our group is actually well known, not necessarily well loved by the administration, but we're well known. And whenever they release a policy for like a new policy or a policy revision, I'm sure they're expecting us to pipe up. And the challenge is time. It obviously takes ages to read their documents, draft letters, collect signatures. It takes a lot of time, but they listen. It's been, I think that our main strategy has just been to be very, very consistent and we are giving the same message, quoting the same policies and laws every time. And so then what happens if they make changes in one place, like to one policy, then we're finding, oh, okay, well, they're trying to do the same thing that they're not allowed to do in this other policy. We just now cite what happened with the previous policy, and okay, they fix it. So yeah, we've had so many wins. Honestly, we've affected so many policies, and we can't take full credit for what happened a couple weeks ago, but I think we can take partial credit. And our president just released a statement on institutional neutrality, which we've been lobbying for 2 years. So she didn't say it was because of us. She couldn't do that, obviously, but and it's also a moment in time where so many other presidents are doing that. But we pushed her repeatedly for 2 years, so we're taking some credit anyway. Okay, thanks. I'll leave it there for now.
Thank you, Rachel. And last but not least, Mary Kate.
Great, thanks for having me. I would say that the story of changing policy at UVA, so far at least, is not a story of group action by our Heterodox chapter. It's hopefully about to turn into that, and I can tell you about that in a second. But mostly it's been individual faculty members stepping forward. And in my case, it wasn't that I saw a problem and got brave. It was I was co-teaching I'm not a PhD, I'm an adjunct professor. And so I had just started teaching 5 years ago, and I had sort of parachuted into academia, and I was teaching political speech writing. I was a speechwriter for George H.W. Bush. So the students all knew that I'm sort of center right and not liberal. And so they decided to start this class called Election 2020. And a liberal colleague and I decided we would do it together and co-teach. But it was the height of COVID, and we were on Zoom, 200 kids on Zoom, and it was a little crazy. But during that time, the president of the university was getting asked left and right, why wasn't he signing the Chicago principles on free speech? And he said, well, if you read that Chicago statement, it's 2 pages long, and the first page of it is how great the University of Chicago is. And I personally do not think the University of Chicago is so great. So we're not signing that statement. We're writing our own. And so he puts together this committee of 12 people. And I was more shocked than anybody that I got asked to be on the committee. And I'm not a free speech expert or anything like that. And I thought, like, okay. So I think it was because I was co-teaching the class and he realized you wanted somebody who was doing that. And so that made sense to me. So, so we wrote basically a 2-page document, and we did not make it how great the University of Virginia is. Instead, we made it refer back to the founding of our nation, which works because Thomas Jefferson founded our university. But we wrote it in such a way that we were hoping many other schools would start signing our statement instead of the Chicago statement. We're still waiting for that, but you guys are all invited to endorse our statement. So that came out in 2021. And then it really opened my eyes to what was going on college campuses, and that there's a lot of events where 2 grown-ups sit and issue a white paper or have a debate, and the students sit in silence and watch. And so that made me think we've got to have more student programming, especially post-COVID. Teach them to put down the phones, stand up for what they believe in, treat each other respectfully. So that's when we started Think Again. Martha told you the four pillars that we stand for, and we started all kinds of student-facing programming, things like oratory contests. We have workshops. We have something called Disagree with a Professor, because 75% of the students at UVA have never disagreed with a professor. And so we're doing stuff like that. It involved a lot of free pizza, and that resulted in a number of new student groups starting up who are interested in the same things that Think Again is doing. We started a fund that all these alumni donated to help support the student groups. And that gave us the ability to say, this is what students are asking for. This isn't the faculty asking for this. This is coming from the students. And that gave us a lot of sort of moral authority, I think, with the administration, because how do they say no to that? It was right after that we started the Heterodox chapter. And we decided one of the strategies should be that Heterodox should co-sponsor some of these student-facing events. And so that got us in front of the students a lot. And next thing we know, the administration names a committee to write a statement on institutional neutrality. And I was the only one on that first committee that was in the Heterodox. And now we doubled the number of people on the institutional neutrality who were Heterodox. So we have 2, but that's huge. So now 3 of us have been on these committees, and they just published the institutional neutrality statement the last 10 days or so. And Martha's got it in both, in the chat. And so now we've kind of got brave, and our next Heterodox meeting, we're going to make a decision. We've got an executive committee of 10 people. And we're going to decide what policies do we want to start trying to change. And that is new for us. And I'll keep you posted how it goes. But at the top of my list is free speech orientation, because we don't have that at UVA. And I would love to start getting that. Greg Lukianoff of FIRE spoke here last night. And I just emailed him this morning and said, hey, what's the ideal? If you were king of the world, what would be the best free speech orientation for incoming students? And I haven't heard back from him yet, but happy to share it once I hear back from him, if that's useful. But that's our next goal. We'll see how it goes.
All right. Thank you, Mary Kate. So we only have about 5 minutes left before we move into these breakout rooms where you can talk with one of these fabulous HXA members who's doing this work. So I'm thinking maybe I'm just going to ask you each to take 1 minute to answer my next question. I'm going to give you a choice of 2 questions. So pick either one you'd like to focus on. Either outline your strategy for achieving your policy impact. I mean, it seems clear you're all working through the channels of shared governance. But if there's beyond that, if there's a particular strategy that you followed, or tell us if you've been or if you expect to be in a position to defend a good policy from somebody who's trying to change it. Why don't we start with Rachel?
Okay, I hope this isn't repetitive, but I guess our strategy, as I said, is to know policies and laws backwards and forwards, and to be extremely consistent. And I think that's our group's strength, is that we, I'll give you an example. So we unfortunately are much like Heterodox Academy, we're misunderstood as some kind of right-wing organization, and it's not true. And now they think we're all Zionists as well. This is, again, also not true. But, we're so consistent in our principles that just recently, for example, we sent a letter to the admin because one of our colleagues here had unfortunately graffiti scribbled on her office door, and it was like F Palestine, and yeah, and it was and not all students agree with your opinion, and it was it was vaguely threatening, and it was certainly vandalism. It was unacceptable. And so yeah, our group wrote a letter to the president to condemn this. And so the thing is, we're so consistent in our principles that, like, regardless of our views, say on Israel, Palestine, like regardless of our views, we are all consistently signing these letters saying we oppose this sort of behavior, and we will stand up for free speech, and the actual individual views expressed are irrelevant. So I think that consistency has been one of our great strengths, along with our deep knowledge of policy and law relating to our administration.
Thank you, Rachel. Scott, do you want to go next?
I would just say, I forgot to mention that as part of building this big group of people, that's where Heterodox Academy really helped, because we have a fairly large chapter of interested professors. And so they just automatically became part of the 24, 25 people that started working on this project with me. And then that creates a groundswell of support. When you go to the LSU Senate, they all stand up and say, we're all behind doing this. So it really matters to kind of build these kind of groups and build it out so that they can achieve some of these kind of policy wins. So again, I'll talk about more specifics if you come visit, but I think that's a good place for me to stop.
Thank you. Mary Kate.
I would say, like I said earlier, to frame this in terms of the students, and that something they can't be opposed to, I would think. I am not a member of the Faculty Senate because I'm an adjunct, so I'm outside the system. And we've also, our Heterodox chapter has faculty, but also staff. And a lot of those people are very, very helpful scenes. And so my advice would be sort of think outside the box and think about students, staff, adjuncts, all these other allies that you can have around town.
Thank you. And last but not least, Peter.
Yeah, thanks. I'll answer the second question. Just be different. Whether we might expect pushback or have to defend this. I think it's plausible we'll have to defend it. I think there are some faculty who would like to go back to what we had of asking for DEI diversity statements. I think it's going to be hard, because I think now the default is to ask for service statements. That's our policy. They would have to actively make the case now for why a diversity statement or DEI statement is a good idea, and I think that's increasingly hard to do. I think it helps that we had a unanimous vote. I think that makes it harder just to bring a motion to change back, reverse the policy. And then a significant change has happened in the meantime is that places like Harvard and MIT have got a larger growing number of universities that got rid of the requirement for diversity statements. And indeed, the Faculty of Arts and Sciences at Harvard has actually adopted the service statement requirement soon after we wrote about this on our HXA blog. And so it's no longer possible to say, well, everyone else is asking for diversity statements, so we should just do the same thing. It must be a good idea. And that was always a weak argument. It's perfectly possible for lots of people to hold a bad idea, but I think it's now untenable to point to that as kind of a default elsewhere. So I do expect pushback at some point, but I don't think it's going to be an easy case to make to reverse.
All right, thank you.